Namaste. Psychoanalysis and philosophy, culture and pathology. When we talk about psychological health, it's mostly or always concerning the individual and his early traumas. We don't normally consider culture as a factor in our framework of analysis, although it is an important determinant in pathology and quality of life. Let us discuss this left out issue of culture as a factor in pathology, quality of life, and in the framework of analysis with our psychoanalysis consultant, Mr. Himanshu Vaidya. Namaste, Mr. Vaidya.
Namaste.
Mr. Vaidya, can we start with how culture comes into the area of mental health?
When we look at problems that we deal with in the area of mental health, only 20% or 25% of problems are such where the determination is primarily biological. In almost 75% of situations, we are dealing with biopsychosocial determination, which is a multifactorial determination of the mental health problem. In different situations, for different people, the proportion that each of the three contributes is different. But the fact remains that essentially we are dealing with a biopsychosocial framework. However, while we do lip service to this statement, we actually don't put this statement into practice as much. So, in terms of our training and in terms of the way we practice, most people go with actually a psychiatrist by and large goes with a bio orientation, and a therapist by and large goes with a psycho orientation, where the primary concern is the individual, the family, and trauma if it occurs in the outside world. But neither the psychiatrist nor the therapist actually deeply factors in the aspect of culture. And this has been so even in the conceptual frameworks that we have. The schools of psychoanalysis that we have, the schools of psychotherapy in general that we have, are primarily not very fond of bringing in this element of culture. So they are by and large culture agnostic schools. And therefore, although we say biopsychosocial determination, we don't really bring in the socio or the cultural part into the pathogenesis analysis or into healing in a very strong way. This is also important because we see that when we look across the world from a public health standpoint, both for quality of life as well as for psychological sicknesses, we see a very ironical picture. Some of the countries which are very low in development, like for example Bangladesh, they show a very high degree of well-being and happiness. So on the classical socio-economic parameters, they may be very low, but on the count of happiness and satisfaction and quality of life, not quality of life, but happiness and satisfaction, and also in case of mental health, they fare much better than what their economic and developmental status is. While on the other hand, extremely developed countries like Sweden show a remarkably high rate of suicide and psychological sicknesses, which cannot be explained given their first world status in terms of education, economics, and development. The same country, let us say you take the example of any Scandinavian country and look at, or even USA, and look at psychological health 25 years back, when they were far less prosperous, when there were far less psychiatric drugs and psychiatric knowledge. And if you compare it with today, in many cases, if we do the right survey, we might end up with a situation that despite the increase in knowledge of psychiatry, despite the increase in drugs availability, new medicines coming in, despite better educational systems and economic development, despite much larger outlays of the government for mental health, despite the institutional infrastructure and mental health being taken down to the school level, despite all of this, the in public health terms, on the psychological health front, they are either plateauing or going down. Very few are showing gains commensurate with the changes in society on economic and other fronts. Obviously, the cultural factor is at play. That because the cultural factor has not been factored in and is at play in a very strong way, we see this kind of an anomaly that the same country 25 years back had a better public health picture of mental health than it is today. Or it has plateaued and has not shown any improvement commensurate with all the actions and resources put in. And on the second hand, we take examples of countries down below on the developmental ladder showing disproportionately high levels of happiness and satisfaction with life, considering their low developmental status. So obviously, when it comes to psychological sickness and when it comes to quality of life and happiness and the level of satisfaction one feels with life, how livable one feels life is, how satisfied one is, on all those parameters, culture plays a very important role. And we'll go into it how in process terms also we can think about it. But from a macro standpoint, this is how the cultural ambit is. And I think except for those who are deep into this area, this is like common sense. You don't have to give 5 reasons to prove how culture is important in psychological health to anybody outside the profession, because it's almost like common sense.
So in that sense, is culture a public health issue?
Culture is very important in public health, both for biological health and psychological health. In biological health, we see many communicable diseases and lifestyle diseases which are completely culture based. Take example in India of encephalitis, that's completely based upon public hygiene. Take the case of diabetes and heart attacks in India, that is completely based upon lifestyle and culture. So from biological standpoint, it's well established. From a psychological standpoint, also it's the same thing. How much expressive or repressive the culture is. What are the child upbringing practices? What is the typical family situation? What is the orientation towards mental health? What are the festivals and rituals created by culture to allow the steam to be released from people? How much does culture support taking care of mental health and supporting people who have trouble? How much has the culture created special rituals, mythological packages, stories, traditions, an entire ecosystem to support the individual at critical psychological junctions of his point of his life? And in India, we call it the 16 sanskaras, 16 important points in everyone's life, and to overcome which there is a particular ritual, a social occasion, and certain festivals created around them. So all this put together brings in this element of culture as to how culture can on a large scale impact this whole idea of public health, both in biological and psychological spheres. There are studies also which tell us that in certain communities, even within the same country, the incidence of certain psychological sicknesses are very high or very low. And there again, we can empirically see the effect of culture, the working of the factor of culture. Uh, you can also see in many communities very high incidences of schizophrenia or perversion or autism. And this is not only genetics, but also a considerable part. In autism, it may be more genetics, but in other parts, there's a considerable element of culture which is at work, as much as the genetics would be. So the socio part is equally important. And in certain cases, the socio part is far more important than the bio or the psycho part, particularly in communities which are under threat of some type, communities in conflict. And in communities in conflict, you can easily see the effect of the socio and the cultural part on widespread psychological distress that we see in communities in conflict.
From what we have talked so far, it seems like culture is a very important determining factor in our lives and even our mental health. And still, is there some reluctance to accept it in the framework of therapy or analysis? And if so, why is that?
The resistance is deep rooted. First, the intellectual model of modernity and particularly Western thinking, which permeates much of psychotherapy and psychology, is based upon ideas of materialism, individualism, hedonism, and contractual society. This is completely at odds with the idea of culture being so important. Because in this conceptual thinking, the collectivity is almost seen as a necessary evil. And culture and society are nothing more than conveniences you have to put up with. But they are not seen either as goals, part of goals, or something enriching our life or enhancing our well-being. Apart from our childhood or sickness dependence. Whereas so that is one part of it, that the entire intellectual paradigm is based upon the whole idea of a self-interest driven isolated individual. It is also based upon the idea of an individual who is fully formed from inside and the outside does not do much to him. So this whole idea of the isolated individual driven by self-interest and contract is one element which is so implicit and so strong in the Western academia that they just don't want to think anything outside of it. And that has as much to do with their own incapability of dealing with groups as much with ideas that they have. That is one. Second, it is escape from controversy. Because the moment you bring in the element of culture, you cannot play the safe game that all cultures are equally good and everyone is happy, because you will have to relatively evaluate which culture is contributing more to psychological health and which is not. And therefore, you will end up with a hierarchy of cultures, hierarchy of cultural practices, and you cannot please everybody in that exercise. And this controversy is so politically charged and so loaded that anybody can be accused of racism or imperialism or some sort of communalism that intellectuals want to keep away from it. So here we have a situation of political correctness and safety overriding the search for truth. That is second. The third element is of vested interests. Because the entire pharmaceutical industry, the insurance industry, and the whole allopathic enterprise is based upon the biofactor. The more you bring in psycho and socio factor, the less important the industry becomes. And this multi-billion-dollar industry has to make sure that the psycho-socio factors are reduced to the extent possible, and this they do by commissioning researches. Right? And they have their own teams of what I call domesticated researchers who produce researches, right, what their masters want them to produce. So this is the third element of vested interest. The fourth element is a paradigmatic problem that they don't know how to handle, because the element of socio and cultural things brings along with them the Eastern cultures, the shamanic cultures, and the non-Western influence cultures, and that brings along with itself ideas of holistic healing and spirituality. And psychology and psychotherapy, where the ideal is to take it nearer to the natural sciences, starts going opposite direction, away from natural sciences towards social sciences. And they don't know how to handle this whole idea of holistic healing, energy body, astral travel, because for them this is nothing other than fiction. This is what happened when acupressure and acupuncture were presented for the first time, when homeopathy was presented for the first time. So this is the fourth element of not being able to deal with what respect to culture aspect of the whole thing will bring in. And the fifth element is reworking in a fundamental sense of the model of the mind, pathogenesis, and the healing technique. Because once you bring in the cultural element, then the whole element of collectivity, festivals, mythology, archetypal rootedness, designing of rituals, all of that will come in. And we will have to look at healing in a very fundamentally different way. Also, the model of the mind in a different way. Because just as one point of view in immunology is that the immune system is not completely built at birth, but after the mother's milk is taken, some components from that are helpful in completing the process of creation of the immune system. So we come with a half-built immune system, and then the completion happens outside the womb in the real world after experiences of having milk and so on. Now, in psychology, the parallel has been by philosophers like Heidegger, not strictly psychology, but broadly in psychology and philosophy, who says that there is nothing like an inbuilt essence with which we are born. Rather, the essence is built in the context of the time we are born and we grow up with. So when he talks of being in the context of time, it as much means that the mind itself gets created in the cultural context we are born in. We can't isolate the creation of our minds, the agencies, the structural components, the fundamental operating system of templates from the culture in which we are born. So that creates such a fundamental dissonance in the way the whole theory has been created and practiced till now, that nobody wants to touch it, and disturb the whole enterprise. I think these are the 5 major elements, and they are all rooted in our training. So people who come out of this training mostly are either in conformity with the training or too afraid to challenge the training. And that is where the resistance to the cultural aspect is coming in.
If this is the case, then is there any evidence to suggest that culture is important in pathology?
Yes, as I said, we can look at uh, the change in culture in Sweden over the last 50 years and look at what kind of pathologies have developed more and what have reduced. We can do that same for the United States, and we can see how the effect of culture is. Take, for example, 2 important people in the history of psychoanalysis, Freud and Kohut. Freud used to get patients essentially with a drive frustration conflict. Essentially, it was a conflict of repression and desire. It was a drive frustration conflict, because he lived in those times where people's desires were heavily repressed, especially sexual and romantic desires. And the culture created a large number of people in pathology. Say, for example, hysteria. Where has hysteria gone? It has reduced so much, essentially because of a change in culture, not because our genes have changed so fast or that our families have changed so fast. From a very common disease, it has become a rare disease. And that is because of culture. The more repressive a culture is, more pathologies you will find of the drive frustration type. And the more liberal a culture is, and the more individualistic and nuclear a culture is, more pathology you will find of the object loss type. So by the time Kohut came in, many of his patients essentially were patients because of either object loss or inadequately good object. They were not essentially the Freudian patients of the drive frustration type. Not that something closes down completely, referring to the proportion. So we can see that in the last 200 years, if we see every 25 years, if we longitudinally study what percentage of pathology was X, Y, Z, and so on, and we can see the changes. Today, we see largely the problems of object loss and narcissistic pathology. We see a lot of personality disorders, narcissistic pathology. Schizophrenia has gone down partly because of medicines, partly because of early detection, partly because of improvement in some family situations. So we can see how culturally even sicknesses rise and fall in public health terms. What is in the top 10 50 years back is not in the top 10 after 50 years. In 50 years, the genes don't change. We have not been able to eradicate that also. And yet there is a change because of the psycho and the social aspect, and the cultural aspect is very important. It's very unlikely that large number of people in any society which is liberal will develop a drive frustration problem. That will always be a small number. It is very likely that people in extremely isolated nuclear individualistic societies will have more problems related to object loss. In societies which are collectively living, you will not have as many problems of object loss as many problems of bad objects. So we can see how the culture comes in. The culture also comes in the sense of how violent or how repressive a culture is. The more violent and the more repressive a culture is, more does it predispose an individual to pathology. It also depends upon how much outlet the culture gives to pent up emotions. Does the culture create festivals, rituals, atmosphere where the pent up emotions can be released? That also is a culturally determined factor which has a very large impact on how much emotions are pent up within individuals. There are cultures where extremely aggressive sports are rituals and they allow people to release their pent up emotions on a regular basis. Whereas in some cultures, any form of violence is shunned. Take, for example, the culture of martial communities in India or some communities in Afghanistan, where the adventure sports or aggressive sports are very common and encouraged. And contrast this with the communities in India which are following the Buddhist path or the Jain path, where any sort of violence is not allowed. And therefore, people don't really have those avenues to let out their anger. So culture also determines how much anger is created. I'm not saying it determines all of it, but part of it. Also determines how much of it can be released out in rituals, festivals, and so on. And lastly, it also helps how open a culture is about mental health. In some cultures, they actually discuss it very openly, but in most cultures, it's a taboo. In some tribal cultures, they actually start the day by sharing drinks. So this is also an important element of how culture affects the psychological well-being of people.
Now we go back to some people in the field of psychoanalysis who possibly touched upon this area of culture in therapy. So in that case, does Lacan bring in the element of culture in psychoanalysis?
Jung brought it first. Jung brought in the element of culture through bringing in the idea of archetypes and mythology. So Jung did not see mythology, archetypal rootedness, rituals, festivals, traditions as something belonging to the uneducated, orthodox, and backward. He saw them as extremely rich sources of enriching life and helping us in preserving mental health. So Jung brought the whole idea of society and culture in for the first time through the archetype and mythology in a much strong way. The whole idea of archetypes, mythology, culture, rituals, festivals.
And the idea of collective unconscious, I think, also possibly is
Yes.
aligned with that.
Yes, because there is a cultural aspect to it. There is a transgenerational aspect to it. There is a collective aspect to it. And then we had Alfred Adler also, who brought in who rather tried to bring in the element of society and culture into psychoanalysis, essentially from a class perspective. And then we had Marxist thinkers who tried to sort of combine to whatever extent they could the Marxist ideas on society and culture with psychoanalysis. And then we have Lacan, who has done it very explicitly by 2 or 3 of his major concepts. One concept is of the ego being a construct essentially from the other and not being one's authentic self. And the second idea being of the big other, that the big other, which is society, law, traditions, heritage, and everything else, is everywhere, including in our minds. So even when we are alone, we are actually with the big other, just as we are with the small others. So in Lacanian conceptualization, society, culture, law, tradition, history comes in much strongly in the model of the mind, in pathogenesis, and to some extent in healing. So we have that line from Hume to Adler to the Marxist theory, Marxist psychoanalyst to Adler, to Lacan. And in Lacan, we see a very big inflow of society, culture, law, tradition in terms of the big other that is everywhere, including inside of us.
Is there a movement from determinism to choice in science, and does it apply to culture also?
Yes, I think it's a part of a broader movement. We see in the last 25-30 years, there is a movement from rigidity to openness, from something frozen to something plastic. So there is a, let us take a few examples. The idea of brain plasticity, where different organs, different parts of the brain uh, come together for a function, or each can take up some role of the other if the other is damaged. The whole idea of plasticity takes us away from that rigidity and makes it a more flexible instrument. Take the idea of epigenetics, that genetics is not everything. Your food and lifestyle and your psychological state are very important in activation and deactivation of genes. Take the idea of holistic healing. Take the idea of group therapy. Take the idea of people getting cured by changing of diets. Take the idea of people getting cured by taking homeopathy or Reiki or pranic healing. And typically what we do is to just brush it aside as placebo or one-off exceptional event. Now that is not something of a very strong argument. It is not an explanation of anything. It is just the non-readiness to investigate something. And this also is coming up in terms of philosophy and psychoanalysis of how our minds get created. Is there something called a creation of our minds in isolation with our families, or is the culture always there? Family itself is not something created separate from culture. It is an institution of culture and soaked into cultural values. So even when we say the family, the culture is still there. And therefore, the movement to include culture in formation of the mind, in pathogenesis, in well-being, in healing, and including it as a part of life for quality of life. All of that is slowly expanding out, and we see more and more of culture, holistic healing, spirituality coming in to the whole area of well-being and psychological health.
Yeah, I think the moment you talk of holistic healing practices of different kinds, the culture automatically comes in without even consciously trying to bring it in.
True.
Because those practices have their origins in that particular culture over centuries or maybe thousands of years.
Yes, and they are rooted in very different paradigms than the current Western paradigm.
Right.
The view of reality and the view of structure of the human integer, the two fundamental ideas are different, poles apart.
Now, how does this aspect of culture work in process terms to bear upon pathology?
In process terms, the first point where culture comes into the domain of psychology is in terms of creating the structural agencies in the mind. So when we say ego and superego primarily deals with morality and ideals, thou shall and thou shall not, and both of them are loaded with cultural values. Superego doesn't fall from heaven, it takes material from culture to create itself. So the formation of superego inside the mind is a culture involving process, a culture involving agency. Similarly, ego, when ego tries to become a an agent of reality. The reality it is trying to synchronize the organism with is the reality of culture. So ego is to a great extent soaked in the incongruence with culture. Similarly, in terms of functioning on this continuum of expression and repression, culture puts us into an acceptable zone. So culture creates this zone of the acceptable zone on the continuum of repression and expression. And that is very important, how healthy or unhealthy that zone is for an individual. And here we have to go to subcultures also, because based upon the socio-economic status of an individual and his place in the hierarchy of society, this zone of acceptability also shifts. And the more deprived you are, more towards repression you have to move, and less privilege of expression you have. So what a rich man has the luxury to speak in public or in front of a powerful person, a poor may not have it. He has to repress much of what he feels, far more than what the rich has to repress. So on that expression repression continuum, you move more towards repression the more deprived you are, and you are able to move more towards expression the better placed you are in general. So the culture also comes in there. The culture also comes in terms of the social support system, in terms of how people live, how many objects are available to a person, especially as a child as he's growing up. So in a culture of nuclear families, it is very easy to have angry parents and loneliness and object loss difficulties. Whereas in a collective society, the difficulties are not this. They may be related to some bad object, but not of object vacuum. So how people live together is also determined by culture, and that has a very big impact of what category of pathology is more likely to develop. I'm talking on a scale, Mars scale. Similarly, the culture also works in terms of how much of a taboo the mental health is, or how much support it gives to people with difficulties, and how much catharsis is possible in the normal course of life given the traditions, festivals, rituals, and so on. So these are the process ways in which the culture helps. In some cultures, we also have some situations or other arrangements to heal psychological difficulties in their own way. So in tribal cultures, we have the shamans and places to heal. In some cultures, we have the confession boxes. In some cultures, we have gurus and exorcists. In some cultures, we have spiritual masters who practice some sort of energy healing or mantra healing or something. So this is yet another way in which in process terms it enters in. The more educated a society is and the more westernized it is, the less this element enters in. The more rural you go, the larger scope of culture entering into the psychological health domain you see. In fact, in India, you can see a radical difference between how much culture plays a role in psychological sickness in rural and urban India. Very different, radically different situations.
Is there avoidance of analysis of culture in psychotherapy in the West as compared to in the East?
Relatively speaking, yes, but there are nuances to it. In psychiatric terms, I don't think either in the East or in the West, anyone puts much emphasis on the social aspect. although relatively speaking, if you look at Indian psychiatrists working, they understand and are appreciative far more of the social situation than anyone trained classically in the West. In psychotherapy terms, in India, you see a slightly better appreciation of the social situation because the therapists themselves come from that situations and are steeped in that situation, so they realize that. So there is a better appreciation in therapy than in psychiatry of the social situation in the East than in the West. However, this appreciation is still not to the extent that it should be. In the sense, we have not developed it conceptually enough to inform either the model of the mind or pathogenesis or our healing method. We appreciate it, it forms a background in the mind. Occasionally we defer to it, but by and large, our practice is modeled more or less on the Western model.
Does Eastern culture seem to have some solution in this regard?
Human beings have never been able to create a perfect culture, so no culture has all the solutions. But just as democracy is the least imperfect of all options, Eastern culture in that sense is least imperfect of all alternatives. And in that sense, uh, it has some better things to offer in terms of spiritual practices, holistic healing practices, and cultural practices compared to the West. And the Eastern culture has been able to map out, because of its long history, what are the difficult points, psychological points in the life of an individual, and they have put up something like 16 points. The point of just getting out of the infantile situation, the point of latency period beginning, the point of puberty, the point of going out into the world, the point of getting married, dying, and so on. And they have created a cultural ecosystem to ease out all these transitions to help a person be psychologically less distressed in these situations. And they also created some spiritual tools, cultural tools, social occasion tools, where well-being practices are integrated as a part of those celebration of festivals or rituals. So those are some of the things which are better in the East, but essentially we have to combine the two and develop the Eastern much more and do some empirical analysis before we can really do a mass scale benefit of what is there in the East.
And how about anything specific to Indian culture, or is it included in when you talk about the Eastern culture?
Much of Eastern is by and large influenced by the Indian culture, because we see the trail from India to Tibet to Japan, India to Tibet to China to Japan, and much of Southeast Asia. We see a second trail from India to Iran to Middle East, and we see a third trail from India to South America. And in that sense, there is a lot of commonality, but specifically a few things stand out if you narrow it down to the Indian context from the Eastern context. One is this whole idea of idol therapy, what is called idol worship, and the entire mythology surrounding it, and the festival surrounding it, and so on. That's a very important element of culture which unknowingly populates and works in very powerful ways in the minds of Indians who are exposed to this culture. And the second is the whole practice of different forms of yoga, because many of them have very good psychological benefits apart from the physical benefits. And this includes not only pranayama and postures, asanas, but also visual guide, the visualization practices, the ritual practices, the herbal practices, as well as the even some of the hallucinogenic practices and the mantra practices. So all these practices are, of course, in the East, but unique to India, which are not as developed elsewhere in the East, and they are also very powerful in being used for psychological health. As of now, we have not really empirically investigated them enough so that we can be safe about their use. But I think people are doing research on that. In next 10 years, we should see something coming out of it.
The last question is that can this entity of culture be worked upon in a way that it can bring in sustainability and minimize pathology?
It can be, but people are extremely afraid of touching it. In fact, we are injured by our own humility here. The humility that says that societies are extremely complex, we understand too little, and therefore, who are we to design a society? But that inaction has cost us far more than our mistakes would have cost us. But it can be done. Definitely, it can be done. In history, we see three different attempts at doing something through culture for well-being of everybody. Taking culture as a vantage point and creating society around it. The culture seeping through society and the culture being itself designed, not default. Today, what we have is a default culture. People do something and something emerges. It's not a designed culture. When we talk of designed cultures, we see three important elements in history. The one we see is the Plato's Republic, which intellectually conceived of a particular kind of kingdom and culture. Could not implement it, but he conceptualized. Then we see the Marxist theory of lower phase of communism and higher phase of communism. They conceptualized it, tried to implement it, did not work out. But there was some attempt at designing the society. And then we see the Indian ancient times where the rishis used to design society. And that went on very well for thousands of years in the Vedic period and pre-Vedic period. Today, we don't have people who are interested in that area. There were some like Pandurang Shastri and a few others who did some work intellectually and practically to proceed on this idea of designing the culture. I think time has come where people who are interested in that area should design something and put it up to society for a collective deliberation and move towards more designed elements other than these default elements. And if we do that, we can bring in sustainability, well-being, and enhance psychological health for society at large.
Thank you, Mr. Vaidya. And it was really a pleasure to discuss culture from this perspective of mental health and all. Because normally when we talk of culture, it goes in a very different direction. We don't connect it with this whole topic of mental health.
Yeah, one more point.
Yeah.
There's a very important point of connecting culture to sustainability and pathology. Because there is an established connection between culture and development. United Nations has put in billions and billions of dollars in Africa without commensurate result in development. And their own study came up with the idea of cultural capital. That if cultural capital is not there, the results that you get by investing economic capital is very low. So the cultural capital is very important for economic development. Similarly, culture is also important for sustainable development from environmental point of view. That also is a cultural issue at the root of it. And culture also is equally important in psychological health and well-being and happiness point of view. One important element is this. Let us say somebody in USA was very poor, a family was very poor, and because of the economic stress, there were psychological stresses in the family and somebody got sick. The family worked very hard, got a lot of money. Next generation was much better. And the generation after it, because of the liberal attitude, the family dissolved and people became lonely, wealthy but lonely. And the third generation again develops problems of object loss. So we have the first generation having problems of drive frustration. The second generation is well off, and the third generation again is suffering from object loss. So this sustainability is very important when we design a culture from every aspect: economic, environmental, technological, and also from a psychological aspect. Just as we say about the population aspect, that when there's too much of liberty and low collectivity, people simply refuse to take the hassle and the responsibility of raising children, and the community tapers off. And then you have to invite immigrants from outside to populate that youth vacuum, which is unsustainable. So the linking of culture to sustainability and psychological health is a very important area from that standpoint.
Okay. Thank you so much again for this additional insight. Do write to us at hvindia@gmail.com. Namaste.
Namaste.